Hello to everybody, dear speakers, dear participants. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of you. You have seen me at the outset. I was just bridging until our moderator for the session, Manjira Matai, would join us. It's a pleasure to welcome you today at the UNEA Cities and Regions Summit, the last session of the day on scaling up solutions to harness the power of nature in cities. And let me just do quickly the housekeeping part, and I hand over. That gives Vanjira a moment to breathe until she gets on the floor. So before we start, I want to remind you that we have live interpretation. It's available throughout the event in English, in French, and in Spanish. And you can choose your preferred audio channel by clicking on the drop-down menu called Floor on top of your screen right above my face. And just to remind you that we will have speakers intervene in different languages, so please select the language that you prefer. So if it's English, then choose English so that you can listen to the interpretation of non-English interventions. I also remind you that the event for the entire audience is in listening mode, and speakers and listeners can use the chat function. And the chat function can also guide you to our technician. And with that, I hand over to Vanjira. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us. A real pleasure to welcome you today to UNEA's Cities and Regions Summit, and especially for this closing session on scaling up solutions to harness the power of nature in cities. Quite frankly, this is an issue that is not entirely intuitive. Cities are often seen as the destroyers of nature, but I know that this narrative is why we are shifting and changing what we think. My name is Wanjira Mathai, and I'm Vice President and Regional Director for Africa at the World Resources Institute. Now, before we start, I just want to make sure that we appreciate our interpreters. There's live interpretation throughout this event in English, French, and Spanish. So feel free to choose your preferred language. And of course, our speakers will intervene in different languages. So make sure you select whatever one that you need to hear for non-English interventions. While our audience today is in listening mode, or both our speakers and listeners can actually use the chat function. So take advantage of that and interact with us. And if you need tech support, Irene is somewhere in the background and will be able to take care of that for you. Now, today's summit is hosted as part of the 5th session of UNEA. Now, the overall theme, strengthening actions for nature to achieve the SDGs. This obviously highlights the pivotal role nature plays in our lives and in society, economics, the environment. What a wonderful thing that UNEA is adding momentum, creating more momentum and impact to catalyze a multilateral effort around protecting and restoring the natural world for our economies. Our cities are the engines of our economies across the world, and so how fitting it is. As Martina said right at the beginning of today's meetings, our Cities and Regions Summit seeks to bring together mayors, local leaders to the table and to ensure that their voices are heard by national governments across the regions. We had several themes today in this closing session. First of all, about urban nature-based solutions to counter climate risks and limit global warming. That was the first thematic session. And then in the second, we discussed how we can leverage sustainable food systems for nature-positive cities, a day packed with great ideas, innovators, and great champions. Our task now, really, in this closing session is to begin to explore scale. How do we mainstream the brilliant ideas you've heard today? And how do we make nature action in cities the norm? We're really pleased to partner in this session with the Jeff-funded UNEP-led Urban Shift. This is a program on cities with $2 billion in investments and involving all of the co-organizers of this summit. In this session, we'll also focus on scaling up solutions to harness the power of nature in cities, framing that discussion on mechanisms that target scale like urban shift, the UN decade for restoration, cities with nature, and regions with nature. So, without any further ado, it is my distinct pleasure, really, to welcome today's speakers. They are distinguished in their own right, leaders who will give us a sense and a glimpse into how our cities' leaders are transforming them. Mauricio Vila Dosal, he's the governor of the state of Yucatan in Mexico on behalf of Regions with Nature. We also have Mayor Valerie Plante. She's the mayor of Montreal in Canada on behalf of Cities with Nature, and she's also ICLEI Global Biodiversity Ambassador. His Excellency Carlos Eduardo Correa Escaf, he's the Minister for Environment and Sustainable Development in Colombia, and then Chairman Badre Kanuni, Board of Al Omran Holdings in Morocco. And then we have Mohamed Bakar. He is the lead environmental specialist at Jeff. We're going to kick this off with a question to Governor Dosal. So, Governor, the floor is yours.
Les envío un afectuoso saludo desde Yucatán, México, a todos los alcaldes y representantes con quien tengo el
Mexico, to every representative, whether you have the pleasure of participating in the second summit of cities and regions organized by the UN Program for the Environment. No doubt, we all know the relevance that cities have for humanity. These are the spaces that have the greater density of population, and through them, it's the engines that promote economy and the growth of our countries. Likewise, being these the most with the more concentration of population, it's also necessities and assistance to the environment. Cities are the ones that generate the greater amount of pollutants, the ones that have more residues, and the ones that demand more electricity. Therefore, the great cities are even though they're a point of development, they also have a high impact on the environment, an impact that becomes greater and larger, and that places us to an inflection point of this climate emergency that we are experiencing. That if we don't look at, we may not be able to go back on. The message is clear. We cannot let any more time go. We have to make messages and take serious action to counteract the effects of climate change and protect nature. In this sense and regard, those of us who are at the forefront of local governments and that for that reason have a very more closeness to the people as well as to our ecosystems must really put a stop to this. We have the capacity to contribute by implementing measures for the protection and restoration of nature through the culture and good practices that are sustainable. For this, all that we need to do is know the biodiversity that exists in these cities as well as natural available resources to know the real impact within the region so as to guide policies that help towards their protection and care, as well as to regulate their use and to focus on sustainability. With this in mind, is that we are really able to provide an inventory of flora and fauna, as well as to enter information concerning what are the priority areas and be more effective in the implementation of their actions and policies. To be able to make this possible, we need to position the issues of sustainability and the environment as a cross-cutting axis of government, establishing this from the plan to align ourselves as well as strategies and policies. We also need to make sure that these subjects are protected and they're converted into law so that they can be provided continuity in those areas which result from the restoration of nature in the long term. As Yucatan government, we have learned that the best policies are those which take place jointly along with society and government as one person with a single objective and with goals to achieve together. Governments cannot work on our own, and we cannot face a problem such as this on our own either if we don't walk hand in hand with our societies. This is why the work in coordination and collaboration with other government bodies and civil society has always been basic in our development as a state. Since I was elected as mayor for Merida and now governor as Yucatan, I have organized a network, which is ICLEI, Sustainable Governments for Sustainability, and working on the portfolio for biodiversity, focusing platforms like Cities with Nature or now Regions with Nature. Regions with Nature is a unique initiative that acknowledges and promotes the value of nature in regions throughout the world, allowing for regional governments to connect and to show our commitment with nature and access to resources to improve our territorial actions in favor of biodiversity. Therefore, I ask decision makers to take ownership of the global concepts of nature-based solutions, and also to add themselves to the tools and platforms that allow us to learn and jointly build cities and sustainable regions of the future. Last but not least, I'd like to say that we are prepared to make a turn on how we relate to cities, regions, and nature. And this is something that we can do together towards a better, sustainable future that is resistant to climate.
Having underscored, we heard it in his voice, the urgency of action. We are in a climate emergency after all, so that absolutely is spot on. I want to especially hold the important point regarding the need to strengthen and use our biodiversity databases. We definitely welcome, therefore, the leadership demonstrated through the two initiatives he mentioned, Cities with Nature and Regions with Nature, on a science-based approach to protecting our ecosystems. So thank you very much. Now, for most city dwellers, as I mentioned earlier, cities are often seen as the enemies of nature. So, Mr. Correa, we'll go with you from absolutely wonderful mega diverse Colombia, hosting close to 10% of the planet's biodiversity. And at the same time, as all countries in Latin America, urbanization levels are pretty high, 80% of the population living in urban areas. I live in Nairobi, so I know exactly what that means, Mr. Minister. What efforts are underway to promote the protection of biodiversity at this subnational level?
Bueno, muchas gracias. Muy buenos días.
Well, good morning, everyone. Hello to all my colleagues and friends who are online today. As you mentioned, Colombia is now the second country that is with the most biodiversity in the country and has a great responsibility on its shoulders to protect our wooded areas and our biodiversity. From Colombia, we are working in several forefronts. Our countries are built from the regions. You know, cities play a major role in these great country purpose that we have. First and foremost, I'd like to mention that in Colombia we have two main goals uh, by 2030 and by 2050, which is uh, carbon neutrality by 2050, decreasing greenhouse gas emissions in 51% by 2030, and being possibly biodiverse or nature positive by 2050. And for this, cities play a major important role. One of the great initiatives of the Colombian government, spearheaded by President Duque, is just to really have biodiversity cities. So, how do we put at the core of the cities our natural resources? To do this at a global level, we have been working with with the uh, World Economic Forum, with the Humboldt Research Institute in Colombia, that depends from the Ministry of the Environment, in the Biodiversity Initiative. And for this, we created a global commission with with over 20 experts from throughout the world to begin working in this initiative. You know, the first document was drafted January 17th of this year, where basically we showed in that document the transformation and the relation of cities with nature. Um, Having said that, it's important to take note that cities and mayors have a great responsibility on them. So, from the Colombian government, we've been working on technical counseling for every city. We initially have 14 cities in the biodiversity program, and we're helping them in these two great purposes: to become carbon neutral and nature positive. And to do this, we're working, different areas, nature-based solutions, where mayors need to understand what exactly are nature-based solutions and the transformative power these have in this global purpose. Also, work in issues considering energy transition, sustainable mobility, and something very important, which is environmental education. So we have created the environmental training school, which is now on the field working along side by side with local leaders and the new strategies and different city models. We must mention that there are cities with projects and without projects. And to be able to create cities that move around nature, there needs to be a city model and project that is built from the territory with the people from the ground up. So we have a program in the field working with local communities so that the communities are the ones that actually launch this initiative, that are able to help us define this initiative. Where do citizens want to live? And so this is why all these initiatives that we've been working on from the national government are so important at a global level. With West, a new development model is based in the cities, which biodiverse cities. And from the Ministry of the Environment, we have been providing all necessary technical consultancy, creating standardized projects that may be useful to the cities. For example, air measurement, water quality, urban forest, and at a subnational level, with the technical support and financial support, so that cities can build these city models they need. So it's incredibly important to just be able to understand what a new model looks like, what a new model is. 80% of the population is now living in cities, where Colombia is due. Over 70% of greenhouse gases are issued by by cities. And this is why it's so important to see the role they play in this global purpose, to build a city from the citizens themselves, to put citizens in the center. So natural resources and nature-based solutions, to involve the public and private sector, as well as the academia, in this particular sense of providing biodiversity. And with this, we are working to go from the territory to the national level, and from the national level to uh, the back to the territories. And this is how we are currently working from the Colombian government. In the next months, in the West, we will be launching the biodiversities book. And so what we are hoping to do is promote this book at a global level, and have mayors who are the town leaders understand the transformative power of nature in their cities by improving quality of life, bringing back competitiveness, generating employment. We feel that over 51 million um, jobs will be created here. So now cities can play a leading role in this a very important global purpose, to be carbon neutral and nature positive. Thank you very much.
An amazing agenda for Colombia, putting citizens at the center to rebuild our cities, collaborating with private sector, and the need to work from the local level to the national level and back. Thank you so much for such a powerful effort there, and a powerful summary, really what we all should be doing. And congratulations to Biodiverse Cities Initiative. It's great to hear that. So next we'll go straight to hear from Badre Kanuni. He is the board chair of Al Moran Holding in Morocco. Thank you so much, Mr. Kanuni, and especially refreshing to hear how a state-owned company is working to promote and respect nature, leveraging the benefits to build and rebuild cities with nature at the center. Over to you, Mr. Kanuni.
Thank you. It's an honor for me to be able to represent and to share with you the Moroccan experience. I will be starting by reminding you that upon initiative of His Majesty the King of Morocco, Morocco has committed itself very decidedly towards putting in place and implementing such ideals as the combating of the climatic change and the change of the whole attitude towards the environment. We have ratified the convention in the light of the Rio Convention, and the 2030 agenda of the United Nations for the sustainable growth is also ours to ratify. Since 2011, sustainable development is a right of the citizen, and as such is incorporated in all activities. And upon a royal initiative, Morocco has also adopted a series of international commitments that are reflected on our policies by adopting, amongst others, a voluntary and integrated approach as part of our national strategy towards sustainable development that will be echoing the orientations of our climatic policies. Also, the contribution of in the Paris Convention on Climate, we made the commitment of reducing CO2 greenhouse gas between now and 2030. Morocco has also put in place various sectorial strategies. I will be invoking indicatively the National Plan of Water 2020-2050, the National Strategy 2030 about renewable energies, covering the whole range of electricity generation activity, to state about some of the experiences we are making in my group. And may I also remind you that when it comes to the uh, urban management and planning, are doing a lot in order to implement all these values at the level of national policies. This is an activity we are carrying out, covering the entire national territory, going all the way down to households. The idea being to inspire the respect of nature in the various activities, and by also projecting and undertaking various activities. We are carrying out the Habitat Project and the territorial modulation project with solutions based on the respect of the nature. And I will be giving you an example. The take into account of the principal climatic issues in Morocco. Um
with each area having its specific initiative, namely exposure to sunshine, to wind, so that we refine the use of building materials to reduce our footprint. The group is also working in the framework of its research and development policy, working to have new partnerships. For instance, we finance a development project to create new materials and also to manufacture local products from recycled raw material. We have pilot projects on the water irrigation, using water from rainfall to buildings, and also to better reuse used water that have been processed to provide some irrigation to green spaces and other. I would like to highlight a few aspects that I have as a priority. In terms of financement, we have an subscription of a bond of $100 million, which has been subscribed eightfold. So that shows that investors are interested and attracted to such sustainable urban development. We also have something that is unique in Morocco, that is the modernization of cities in line with the United Nations initiatives. I'd like to thank their support. This is an approach based on the respect of nature, to have green cities that are adapted to the local concept. So adapting our cities with nature in our mind, so to rethink our different cities in Morocco. These recommendations arise from policies in Morocco, encouraging verticality in the urban organizations to avoid the spreading out of urbanization and promote green areas within urban areas. So in order to better contribute and help nature foster within our urban areas.
It's so important to see the role of private sector driving circularity, driving the use of local materials, recycled materials, producing locally, and driving the economy with circularity at heart, and promoting green spaces in urban areas, an issue that is so, so close to my heart. So thank you so much, and thank you for sharing the efforts that are going on in Morocco. Thank you. Again, I want to check and make sure that Mayor Plant has an opportunity. Is she with us?
Welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience. Good morning or good afternoon to all of you. I'd like to uh, greet all the panelists. This is very timely to this discussion about biodiversity in our cities, in our countries. I am a mayor in Canada. We are participating in C40, and so for the city of Montreal, we are working into green and inclusive city. This is essential if we want to fight against climate change and promote biodiversity. We have the translation at heart, and inclusion also is our priority. This is our way to move forward in a sustainable way for a better future, sustainable future. The pandemic has highlighted the need in renewing efforts for creating green areas. This is a place where people meet. It also encourages people and improve their well-being and their health. The pandemic has been a driver for us to act. Our main target was to center the nature in our city and also to have it at the core of our decision making. We are actually implementing a climate plan, including concrete measures for adaptation and greening our city. I'm so proud of the climate plan. It has been elaborated in collaboration with all stakeholders from the economic, cultural, social areas, with the participation of experts as well. And we helped financially to maintain and budget and improve them in order to plant new trees, to improve our river, because Montreal is an island, and also we are working to fight against climate change. We have created a large park, more than 3,000 hectares. That will be the biggest municipal park. This park will protect biodiversity in this urban area. So on the ground, we are working actively to protect biodiversity to the benefits of our population. To this end, we decided to plant 500,000 trees to create a zero emission area at the heart, in the center of Montreal, and to strive to improve access to water, and also to provide access to water and to our citizens so that they can discover the beauty of our river. So we are working with our partners. This is key to have an adherence from the public, and so that they see, thanks to our transparency, what we have been doing in terms of resilience, fight against climate change, and protecting the local biodiversity. I thank you for your attention.
The leadership that Montreal continues to show, 500,000 trees to create a green zone in the city. And indeed, you're right, the pandemic has been nothing like it to remind us how central nature is to our lives. Thank you for underlying that and underlying the role of biodiversity and green infrastructure. Thank you very much. And finally, we want to hear from Mr. Bakar, from Jeff. And I just wanted to pose, Mr. Bakar, that you have been one of the global champions for nature, and we're really grateful about that. And why do you think cities are central to achieving the global goals, and what role can Jeff play, is Jeff playing to support cities in this direction?
Thank you very much, Punjira, and good to see you. And good to see all the wonderful mayors and city leaders that have participated in the summit so far. On behalf of the Jeff CEO, Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, who really wanted to be here, I bring greetings from the Jeff Secretariat. As demonstrated throughout this summit, clearly mayors and city leaders around the world are rising up to the challenge of positioning cities as major sources of innovative solutions to a myriad of global environmental problems facing the planet. And clearly, this is going to be critical for achieving global goals on nature. The good news is that cities are naturally integrated in terms of functions. Therefore, they promise great transformation potential to address the multiple environmental challenges in an integrated manner. Cities also have the scale, innovation, collaboration advantage for quick action and impactful sustainability solutions to meet the global goals of various multilateral environmental agreements, including those served by the GEF, by the Global Environment Facility, the UNFCCC, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, and the chemical related conventions. So it is not surprising that these conventions now recognize cities as key spaces and actors to meet their ambitious goals. For example, recently at the summit at the global COP in Glasgow, there was a pact that explicitly called for local government action on climate change, and we're also looking forward to the draft post 2020 biodiversity framework that will be discussed at the next CBD COP. Has explicit focus on urban biodiversity. So clearly, we are seeing this momentum being embraced by the conventions that we serve as a GEF. And with the great leadership being shown by the mayors, we have clearly no doubt that cities will be critical in the race to net zero, the race to resilience, the biodiversity framework, which Mayor Correa has talked about, the urban nature declaration, and many others. So for us in the GEF, given the fact that we have financial mechanism for these MEAs, we consider cities as a vital part of efforts to invest in global environmental benefits for people and the planet. Since our inception just over 30 years ago, we have invested in various projects focused on urban areas, but it was only during the sixth replenishment cycle that we had a concerted effort to engage cities in an integrated approach. And since then, we have established collaborative engagement with more than 50 cities in 17 countries, involving all the leading multilateral development banks, various UN partners, and formal city organizations, including ICLEI. With a grant of nearly 300 million, the Jeff Sustainable Cities program has mobilized nearly $4 billion US dollars in co-financing, and we're working extensively with the private sector. And what's really exciting is the opportunity we have collectively created for knowledge sharing and learning, which gives cities access to cutting-edge tools, expertise, financing, innovations to advance in sustainability agenda. Let me just quickly give some examples of where we have come in with the nature agenda. The emphasis on nature has been a strong point in our integrated approach. And there's evidence that protection and restoration of nature in and around cities can build climate resilience, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, conserve significant biodiversity, and also deliver various social and economic benefits. We already heard from some of the mayors that are participating in our program, like Mayor Kanuni in Marrakesh. But let me just highlight a few others. Asuncion in Paraguay has successfully engaged with local communities to restore green areas, and they have developed a new governance mechanism to strengthen coordination of how nature is integrated in land use planning. In Kigali, we're working with the city there to restore urban wetlands as part of their flood mitigation solution. In India, Chennai is planning to restore its largest lake, which provides key ecosystem services to the city and is a host of significant biodiversity. There are many other cities in the program: San Jose in Costa Rica, Belém in Brazil, Ushuaia in Argentina, and Chengdu in China, that are all taking ambitious actions to adopt nature-based solutions and create biodiversity corridors. So clearly, nature is an integrated part of our approach, and we see this as a very strong direction towards achieving the global goals, something that we will look forward to scaling up in our Jeff 8 program. So let me stop there and hand it back to you, Mandira.
Mohammed, that was terrific, and nothing like aligning with financing $4 billion in co-financing. That is really terrific. Thank you so much. And I'm going to come back to you, Mohammed, but I just want to come first to Mayor Plant as we close, just to say, first of all, how important the political economy is, that when you as mayors and governors lead, the rest follow. And that's such an important thing. I want to ask you in closing, what is the one thing, if you had a magic wand, Mayor Plant, what is the one thing you would emphasize to scale up nature-based solutions in cities? And how do we accelerate this movement?
Well, and it is a good one because for cities, we always come up with solutions that are, connected to our citizens' needs. And this is probably my message today, and how cities are a thriving force on how we can come up with innovative solution, great initiative, often based on people's needs and their interests. And I think this is all we need and want. When we talk about fighting climate change, the population needs to be mobilized and involved. So the one thing I would like for the city of Montreal, but all cities, all my colleagues around the world leading big cities and all kinds of cities, is to be taken, I would say, very seriously in terms of how we can contribute. And I'm very glad that iClay exists. I'm thinking about the C40 as well. And all these, when we think about the Cities with Nature platform, it is very important. This is where we share knowledge. We can also support each other, but we also want to carry a strong message that we are part of the solution. And we can, again, not only come up with great ideas and very grassroots solutions, but this is how we will do it. We will, if we bring together with us, the population, our citizens, they're the one going through changes, and change is not always easy, but cities have the capacity and the possibility to mobilize everybody. So for sure, like I said, the iClay for me is a very important network. As the local ambassador for, as the global ambassador for local biodiversity, I take this role very seriously. And again, my hope is that we can be more part of those conversations with leaders of other level of government and around the world, so cities can fully participate to our common goal, which is to protect biodiversity, fight climate change without leaving anyone behind. Because for me, the key is fighting climate change, but being inclusive and protecting our people. So we don't reproduce this system where the most vulnerable are left behind. That's very crucial to me. And this is where cities can play a very leading role.
You're absolutely right, Mayor Plant. I wish you were the mayor in all these cities. That is exactly what we need in our part of the world in particular. And I really like your point about cities driving, because this is exactly the case. I want to see whether Minister Correa is still on the line. I don't see him on screen, but if you're still there, I wanted to give you the magic wand and see what you would want to change. But let me see with my tech team. I don't think Minister is online. We'll come back to him if he is. But I'll come to you, Bea Kanuni, from Marrakesh. If you had a magic wand, what would you see as the most important thing that we would need to emphasize to scale up nature-based solutions in cities?
Thank you for your question. I fully adhere to the Mayor Valérie Plante has said. It is absolutely clear. It is a shared responsibility from all stakeholders And to go back to our experience as a public operator, we work on the Moroccan territory in practically all Moroccan cities in Africa. We expect further urbanization because today we have 62% of our population living in the city, and we expect it to rise to 70% even further. So we have to think ahead and try and find a solution. We work hand in hand with our government, with the central authorities, with the regions, the head representative of states, but also with cities. We work with mayors and elected representatives. So what is important is that of course, we are bound by the institutional framework on the regulatory point of view, but what is important is that the approach should be in favor concretely that has to show the synergy between all stakeholders and players, so that we have the citizens, we have the private, we have the government representative, and the important is that we all work together towards a common goal, a convergence that we find in the definition of the policies set out by the government, but the implementation has to be done at the local and regional level. That's of course obvious, but we have to include and support the local representatives' opinion to go towards that common goal of sustainable development with nature at the core. This is to the benefit of our population. So we cannot act without the participation, the involvement of civil society and our citizens. They need to be involved first for awareness purposes. They need to be sensitized and motivated. They need to understand, but also they can contribute to some proposals, and they can follow up the initiatives and project implementations. So we cannot do without the involvement of civil society and the population to give nature the place it deserves in our societies.
Indeed, as you have said, it will take all hands on deck. And you're absolutely right about the regulatory framework. It needs to be set to support the private sector to do the right thing and to drive change on the ground. Thank you for all you are doing. Mohammed, I come over to you. I hand you the magic wand. What would you like to see?
But thank you very much, Wanjiro. I think from our point of view, clearly we recognize that nature-based solutions in cities cut across various sectors and government departments. So, accelerating nature-based solutions will require adoption of a stronger integrated urban planning approach, which spreads across many dimensions, specifically institutional integration that involves both the vertical dimension between national and city governments. And I think we've heard that already from some of the speakers, and also horizontally across sectoral departments within the city. We also like to see spatial integration to include urban peripheries, rural areas, and protected areas where relevant, because cities are not isolated from the context within which they operate. So that connection needs to be there from a spatial perspective. We also need to see integration from a social standpoint. That's the inclusion that Mayor Planto was talking about, making sure that nobody's left behind in advancing the agenda, to ensure that every dimension of the society is accommodated. This approach obviously will require large scale finance. We recognize that, but there's a need to review current policy frameworks and economic models that have not appropriately valued nature within the city, but also sometimes create disincentives to invest in nature, and to a certain extent have led to widening the financial gap for nature in cities. So there are ways we can narrow this gap, and I think this is where the engagement by institutions such as ours is very critical. First, we can work with governments to create favorable policy and regulatory environment that discourage or minimize the harmful practices, enable new actors such as the private sector to invest in nature, and also provide incentives for investing in nature by capturing the positive externalities that come out of those investments. And then finally, we also need to push for greater policy framework, policy coherence framework, where the countries can and cities can work to reinforce policies on nature across departments, across sectors, and also across agencies. Such policy coherence will not only ensure that we can avoid negative trade-offs, but also lead to mobilization of finance from multiple sources. So these are some of the things that we are working on as we look forward to Jeff 8. Thank you.
In the context of what needs to happen to catalyze the sort of change that you have indicated at the city level and with that leadership. I want to come back and see if Minister Correa is still there. I know he had dropped off, but is he back?
Muchas gracias, Wajira. Aquí estoy. Estaba conectado, parece que hubo un problema.
Much, Wajida. I was here. Online challenges, but I'd like to share a few words from my colleagues, Mayor Plante, Mohammed. Before being minister, I was mayor for my city, so I'm going to speak with both hats on. As minister and as a mayor. And I know Mohammed was mentioning something that I thought was incredibly valuable, and that would be public policy, my friends. Public policy from the national government. We have been building a public policy that allows the private sector, the public sector, the cities, the departments, and the academia trot down a path that is not only about a temporary government program, but rather a program that transcends from government to government, regardless of changes in administration. So a framework for the country is crucial here. And it is very clear here that mayors must work in line, coordinated amongst themselves and with the national policy, and that at the same time they are able to bring this to the public policies they implement. In Colombia, we now have a climate action law which seeks these two major goals of nature positive and carbon neutral. And what the cities need to do, and what we've been working on, is exactly that, to align them in that road for the following 30 years. When I was mayor, I had the opportunity of building a 20-year plan. It's called Monteria Sustainable Environment facing the river. And why facing the river? Because we felt water was a transformative element for any city, the one that can really empower the city to achieve what they needed to do. So make it urbanly sustainable, environmentally, socially, economically sustainable. And so this is a very, very nice case study where it lets us know that nature-based solution, when they're at the center of the development of a city, have tremendous capacity to interact, to coordinate, and it helps have a great territorial ordainment, and based on biodiversity and nature-based solutions. So from the national government, they're currently sowing 180 million trees. We're protecting 30% of marine and land areas. We're working against deforestation. We are restoring 300,000 hectares. And this is something that So we're talking about urban and rural areas. And cities that capitals have, there's so many rural areas in the periphery. And I mean, cities are not unarticulated. They work jointly with the areas that surround them. And you have to bear in mind that, migration comes to the cities. So everybody needs to prepare for the coming years. And this is why this nexus needs to be established. So bringing national policy, landing it into local policy, have our own initiatives from a local standpoint to also be able to apply them. Each city has a competitive advantage and an opportunity and a problem to solve. That's all each their own. So we really need to understand all of this to be able to really apply this throughout the territories. So nowadays, every city must be aligned with the global purposes of a nation. And to do this, we need a lot of education, a lot of citizen involvement, because building a city entails other things. It's not just printing public policy and leaving it in desk. No, how do we make it a living, breathing thing? How do we bring it to our citizens? And this is why we need to educate from the beginning, universities, public and private sector, to just really be able to um, see the models and talk about nature-based solutions, which speak not only of preserving resources, but rather about creating new opportunities, about taking advantage of new opportunities to generate competitiveness, to have nature-based tourism, to have better quality of life, better quality of air, better quality of water, better mobility. So if something is clear here in the Paris Agreement, is that we need to really bring down the planet's temperature, but as a city, I have to ask myself, okay, so how am I going to do this for my little corner of the world? Okay, through mitigation, adaptation, and this is what nature-based solutions are aiming for, and the territorial focus in biodiversity. This is why cities must understand that the model is a comprehensive one. It is conjoined, it is articulated, seeking for cities to be sustainable in the medium and long term. We really need to do all the work we can by activating city networks, mayor networks at a global level throughout every country in the world. We need to run an education campaign. We need to teach our people what nature-based solutions actually are, what biodiversity actually means, to be able to apply these models. The biggest challenge faced by cities is to build a city model based on nature that is uh, pa- participative, so that people can actually implement these models and can live under these models. Cities like Vancouver, Amsterdam, cities like Medellin, Monteria, they have been finding these models and this element that can actually empower the territory. I always speak to my colleagues, mayors, ex-mayors, everybody that'll hear me. Find the empowering element in each territory, and if you have a river, face a river. We have to return the river to the city and the city to the people, and based on that, we will be able to really empower this new biodiversity model. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Your leadership in all of this and building a program that transcends the administration, that involves everyone. It's so empowering to hear that and hearing how you're building this in Colombia, planting over 100 million trees, restoring 300,000 hectares of land. Unbelievable. Thank you so much for sharing. I hope your legacy lasts well beyond those years, may it be 100 and 200. This is absolutely wonderful. Minister Correa, Mayor Plant, Mr. Kanuni, and Mohammed, this has been extraordinary, really wonderful hearing you, the commitment, the role of your leadership in pointing the direction, quite frankly, driving the rest of us in the direction that we need to go with respect to cities. The truth is that most of us actually do live in cities that we absolutely love. But often we watch the sidelines and see what happens to our cities and how they grow, and maybe not always in the right direction. You have told us and shown us that it's possible to join hands with you and make cities the cities that we want to see. Thank you for your leadership and your engagement and the financial investments that are going into cities and cities of the future. We are so grateful for all of you. Thank you very, very much for being with us today. It's my pleasure now to invite virtually for closing remarks. We have Mayor Anna Koning from Stockholm. She's the mayor of Stockholm and also C40 vice chair, and then swiftly followed by Inger Anderson, the executive director of the UN Environment and also Under Secretary General of the United Nations. Over to the tech team. Thank you all so much. What an inspiring session that was.
Dear colleagues and distinguished delegates, as a mayor of Stockholm, I'm very honored to be here and share my thoughts with you in this closing session of the second UNEA Cities and Regions Summit. And as many of you will know, Stockholm was the host city of the groundbreaking 1972 UN Conference on the Human Environment. It was groundbreaking not just for being the first ever global environmental conference, but also for its legacy, from the establishment of UNEP to the recognition that a healthy environment is essential for our long-term prosperity, that threatened species need international protection, that each nation has a duty not to pollute others, and that collaboration is key to solving environmental issues. As the first UN summit to future and welcome groups from civil society, it also set a priority of active participation of non-state stakeholders in all subsequent UN meetings. And in a time in where progress often seems out of reach or slow at best, the UN Conference on the Human Environment serves as an important reminder that one meeting can make a real difference and that real change is possible. And when it comes to tackling the environmental crisis of our time, climate change, biodiversity loss and pollution, cities are making that change happen. And in Stockholm we have managed to reduce per capita CO2 emissions by around 60% since 1990. And during the same time span, our city has grown by around 300,000 people, and we have doubled our GDP. And this shows that ambitious environmental policies and economic prosperity can go hand in hand. And it underlines the enormous potential of cities and subnational actors. And as a level of government closest to the citizens, cities and regions can provide the national and international level with invaluable input on the needs and opportunities on the ground. And with our expertise, we can help develop better and more effective legislation that delivers real results. Together with academia, civil society and the local business community, we can do much more for our environment and for our people. This second UNEA Cities and Regions Summit has been a real testament to the vital role of our cities and to the fact that this role and the importance of multi-level governance is being increasingly recognized at the international level. Which gives me not just hope, but belief that the future we want is truly within our reach. That said, I cannot wait to personally reinforce this message at Stockholm Plus 50, a healthy planet for the prosperity of all, our responsibility, our opportunity. When the UN is finally back in Stockholm this June, and I look forward very much in person to seeing you there. Thank you and welcome to Stockholm.
In a few days, we'll gather at the resumed session of the 5th UN Environment Assembly, or UNEA. Our aim is to deliberate on actions that can transform our relationship with nature. And in fewer areas is this more critical than in how we build, how we manage, and how we live in our cities. In thinking about the cities that we want, we now have a deeper understanding that cities must grow with the natural world, not against it. The grey in our cities is impacting human and environmental health. Bringing the green back is a critical challenge. Now, local and subnational governments play a critical role and a central role in making these shifts. I'm therefore so very pleased that ahead of UNEA, we've provided a unique platform to give local and subnational governments a voice. You've spent the day hearing about the challenges that stand in the way of cities where people and environment thrive in equal measure. But today I want to speak to you about what is working and the solutions before us. For example, in Montreal, city and federal officials have expanded parks, saving millions in healthcare costs and reducing air pollution. And Freetown's amazing Freetown the Tree Town campaign uses digital tools to recover lost tree canopy, providing climate resilience and reducing heat stress and the risk of landslides. And in Medellin, 36 green corridors have reduced temperatures by up to 4 degrees Celsius. These inspiring stories demonstrate that we can carve a space for nature in planning, designing, and managing our cities and regions. This will make a big contribution to efforts to overcome what we at UNEP call the triple planetary crisis: the crisis of climate change, the crisis of biodiversity loss, and the crisis of pollution and waste. But how do we move such inspiring examples from the exception to the norm? Well, empowering multi-level governance is critical. We need whole-of-government approaches to unlock the potential for nature to deliver resilient, smart, and sustainable solutions. When we invest in nature and we integrate that into climate strategy, into infrastructure standards, into building codes, and into planning guidelines, then we make the difference. And when we invest in that mangrove that protects the city, or that urban wetland that can collect the water in heavy rainfall, then we are investing in nature's infrastructure, and that cannot be ignored. We also have to bring nature into our balance sheets so that we better quantify the multiple benefits that make a strong business case for city leaders, financiers, and private sector alike. And as we do so, we must learn from communities so that everyone wins. And finally, I urge you to tap into the work of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration and Urban Shift, a GEF-funded program that UNEP is implementing along with partners, so that together we can lift nature into our cities. My thanks to your engagement today, and deep thanks to our many partners: the Global Environment Facility, UN Habitat, IUCN, FAO, UNDP, C40, ICLEI, WWF, the Global Covenant of Mayors, United Cities, and local governments. I look forward to hearing about the outcome of this important discussion.
And with that, we have come really literally to the end of our full day, well, a very, very exciting full day. I hope you join me in thinking that full day meeting, and the outcomes will be captured in an outcome document that will be shared widely, and including on the UNEP website. There will be a reporting back, which will be kindly done by Mayor Koenig from Stockholm to the UNEA plenary, and that will be taking place on the 2nd of March. So in a couple of days at the closing panel of UNEA. And with that, thank you very much. Thank you to all our co-organizers and the team that has put things into place so diligently, and apologies for some of the technology glitches that did sneak in. Bye-bye.